Most cultures had a concept of a month because it could see the phases of the moon. It could see the moon, the new moon, the crescents, the full moon, and cultures could define a lunar cycle for themselves.
Egypt didn't just track time, they engineered it. Long before the Greek philosophers or Roman reformers touched a calendar, the people of the Nile were already mapping the sky, the river, and the seasons with a precision that shouldn't have been possible for the ancient world. Archaeologists now know their system wasn't a simple tally of days. It was a coordinated network of lunar observations, stellar markers, and seasonal cycles that shaped an entire civilization. Right now, the evidence points to something far more advanced than anyone expected. And as this video unfolds, it reveals a detail in their calendar so sophisticated that it forces a complete reconsideration of how early scientific thought actually began. They truly were geniuses ahead of their time. The first traces of an ancient time system. The earliest signs of an Egyptian calendar appeared long before writing spread through the Nile Valley. Archaeological layers from the pre-dynastic period show that communities tracked the moon and the Nile flood with surprising consistency. Right now, the evidence shows something important. Egyptians recognized repeating natural cycles earlier than many neighboring societies, and they treated these cycles as measurable patterns rather than unpredictable events. Potsherds, bone tally marks, and notations on ceremonial palettes demonstrate a recurring 30-day rhythm connected to the moon's visible phases. Recent excavations at Elephantine Island uncovered ivory tally sticks bearing repeated symbols for lunar intervals, suggesting that early priests monitored sky and river cycles together far earlier than previously documented. These markings were not random decorations. Their spacing and repetition indicate deliberate tracking meant to align community activities with the moon. As Egypt became more organized during the early dynastic period, these observations were formalized. Priests and administrators linked each lunar cycle to practical needs: grain distribution, herd management, flood preparation, and temple rituals that required precise timing. The calendar did not yet resemble the later 365-day system, but the foundations were already clear: measurement, prediction, and state-level coordination. Communities living near the riverbanks documented the rising and retreat of the Nile, noting how its behavior shaped food availability, work schedules, and seasonal religious obligations. They also began watching the skies for indicators tied to the flood, including bright seasonal stars that disappeared and reappeared on consistent annual intervals. Here's where the picture sharpens, and this is truly fascinating, because the earliest calendar functioned as a survival mechanism grounded in environmental evidence rather than abstraction. Timekeeping emerged because the land demanded it, and early Egyptians shaped their first temporal system around rhythms they could observe with reliability. This shift from simple observation to structured lunar coordination opens the path to the next stage, where months became tools of administration, and early Egypt began organizing its entire year around the moon, the lunar calendar. As Egypt entered the Old Kingdom, the lunar calendar became the primary tool for tracking time. Each month began with the first visible crescent after the new moon. This was confirmed by priests trained to observe the sky at dawn, and temple records show that these observations governed festivals from provincial shrines to major cult centers. Right now, the evidence pulls us toward a clear conclusion. Each month carried the name of a significant ritual, meaning that timekeeping was inseparable from religious identity. The calendar reflected what communities valued, celebrated, and prepared for. The lunar calendar divided the year into 12 months, each running 29 or 30 days, depending on the phase count. This produced a year of roughly 354 days. Because this year was shorter than the agricultural cycle, it gradually shifted out of alignment with the seasons. To correct this drift, the state occasionally introduced an intercalary month. Inscriptions and administrative logs show that this extra month was not automatic. It was inserted only when lunar timing had moved too far from the Nile's cycle to maintain practical coherence. The decision required coordinated communication across temples and administrative centers. The system worked, but it demanded constant supervision. Observers relied on clear horizons, consistent sightlines, and verified reports from distant regions. Agricultural planning, taxation cycles, and temple schedules required predictable timing, and the lunar system alone could not deliver long-term stability for projects that unfolded over multiple years. Here's where the turning point emerges. The lunar calendar served community life with precision, but state administration needed an anchor that did not drift. That requirement pushed Egyptian timekeeping toward astronomical regularities that exceeded the moon's shifting pace. This administrative pressure directs us towards Sirius, Sothis, whose annual rising offered a stable celestial signal strong enough to redefine the structure of the Egyptian year. The rise of astronomical timekeeping. The heliacal rising of Sirius, called Sothis by the Egyptians, became one of the most significant astronomical markers in antiquity. This rising occurred when the star reappeared on the eastern horizon just before sunrise after a period of seasonal invisibility. Right now, the evidence points us toward a critical realization. Egyptians identified the rising of Sothis as a dependable signal tied directly to the annual Nile flood. Middle Kingdom texts and later inscriptions confirm that this correlation was recognized as early as the Old Kingdom, even if formal documentation appears later. Additional archaeological context strengthens this link. Records from provincial temples show notations aligning local agricultural decisions with Sothic observations, suggesting that awareness of the star's timing extended far beyond elite astronomers. The consistent alignment between Sirius and the flood allowed Egypt's officials to anticipate both the onset and intensity of the inundation, shaping decisions about canal maintenance, levee inspections, and grain storage capacity for the coming year. Linking Sirius to the flood created a natural anchor for New Year's Day. Temple inscriptions and agricultural records show how this single astronomical event coordinated labor deployment, storage cycles, and festival sequences. When Sirius reappeared, farmers prepared fields for inundation, administrators scheduled tax-related inspections, and priests initiated ceremonies marking renewal. In this way, Sirius provided a solar-based rhythm that stabilized the agricultural and religious year. Yet the lunar calendar remained in use alongside this new celestial marker, and the two systems slowly diverged. Lunar months shifted against the fixed solar cycle, causing festivals tied to the moon to drift away from the agricultural seasons. Administrative papyri from the Old Kingdom and later periods show growing difficulty synchronizing complex temple timetables with agricultural operations that depended on the flood. This widening gap made it increasingly clear that a more stable system was necessary for efficient governance. The celestial reliability of Sirius highlighted the instability of the lunar year, demonstrating the need for a fixed count that aligned with both the river and the sky. That requirement led Egypt toward an innovation with lasting global influence. This push for consistency and administrative precision sets the stage for the creation of a fixed 365-day civil calendar, Egypt's most enduring contribution to the measurement of time. The invention of the 365-day civil year. Egypt's administrators needed a calendar that didn't drift, didn't depend on moon sightings, and didn't disrupt agricultural planning. Right now, the evidence shows that this pressure triggered one of the most influential innovations in human timekeeping: the fixed 365-day civil year. Egyptians created it by counting the days between the heliacal risings of Sirius, a cycle that repeated with remarkable stability across centuries. The reliability of this interval provided a measurable framework that could support long-term economic planning, large-scale irrigation work, and the increasingly complex structure of Egypt's centralized state. The civil year divided time into 12 months of 30 days, grouped into 3 seasons: Akhet, flood; Pereh, growth; and Shemu, harvest. To complete the year, Egyptians added 5 additional days at its end. These epagomenal days existed outside the normal monthly structure. They carried religious significance, marking the birthdays of major deities in later texts, but their functional purpose was administrative: to stabilize the year and prevent the months from accumulating drift against one another. Their fixed placement at the year's end also simplified bookkeeping across domains ranging from grain storage to temple offerings. This calendar intentionally ignored the extra quarter day in the true solar cycle. The result was a drift of about 1 day every 4 years, a slow shift that Egyptians understood but accepted. Their priority was organizational clarity, fixed dates for taxation, construction cycles, temple accounting, long-distance trade scheduling, and multi-year projects. Evidence from administrative papyri shows that predictable dates were more important to Egyptian officials than aligning perfectly with the astronomical year. The civil calendar created a stable cycle that could be repeated indefinitely without recalibration. Inscriptions from the early Old Kingdom, alongside dated tomb materials and state record fragments, confirm how early this system became embedded in everyday governance. Its endurance for more than 3 millennia reveals how effectively it served Egypt's administrative goals. It also provided the structural logic that later Greek and Roman reforms would adapt, creating echoes that remain in the modern calendar. Here's where things turn, because once Egyptians committed to a fixed 365-day year, the calendar reshaped not just dates, but the entire organization of Egypt's economy, labor systems, and ritual structure, forcing society to operate within a deliberate and repeatable 3-season rhythm that defined every activity tied to the Nile. The 3-season structure. Egypt's year revolved around the Nile, and the civil calendar formalized this into 3 structured seasons: Akhet, Pereh, and Shemu. Right now, the evidence shows that this arrangement reflected the reality of the river's annual cycle rather than an abstract categorization. The seasons aligned with predictable environmental stages that shaped agricultural work, religious observance, and the deployment of state labor. Akhet, the flood season, marked the months when the Nile rose and submerged farmland. Agricultural activity paused as fields disappeared beneath layers of water and silt. Workers shifted to state-directed labor, and Old Kingdom tomb inscriptions describe workforce rotations assigned to quarries, construction sites, and canal expansions. These records show that Akhet became the backbone of state projects precisely because people temporarily could not work their fields. The season also influenced temple activity, as offerings and festivals often acknowledged the life-giving flood. Pereh, the growing season, began when the water retreated, and left behind fertile soil. Farmers planted barley, emmer wheat, vegetables, flax, and other staples. Administrative papyri show detailed land surveys performed during Pare, noting field boundaries, irrigation schedules, and expected yields. Officials conducted inspections of canal systems and documented repairs needed to ensure controlled watering. The season represented the most intensive agricultural planning period of the year. Shemu, the harvest season, closed the cycle. Grain was reaped, collected, and transported to state granaries managed jointly by temples and government agencies. Records from the Middle and New Kingdoms describe precise grain measurement systems used to track incoming harvests, redistribute supplies, and calculate tax obligations. Labor teams documented in village registers show how communities coordinated harvest work and delivered portions to various authorities. This three-season structure synchronized Egypt's bureaucracy and agriculture into a unified rhythm that remained stable across centuries. It provided predictable cycles for planning, enabling centralized authority to manage projects on a scale unmatched in the ancient world. Farmers, priests, and administrators operated within a shared temporal framework that connected local activity to state-level organization. The calendar didn't simply reflect Egypt's environment, it translated the Nile's behavior into an administrative schedule that determined economic output, religious timing, and social coordination for an entire civilization. The first system of nighttime timekeeping. Egyptian priests developed a distinctive method for tracking time at night using decans, groups of stars that rose in a predictable sequence roughly every 40 minutes. Current research indicates that this system predates many later astronomical traditions and served roles ranging from temple ritual timing to agricultural coordination. It acted as an early form of mechanical-free timekeeping, relying solely on observable celestial motion. Deacon lists appear in Middle Kingdom texts, and New Kingdom coffins preserve elaborate star tables, charting when each deacon rose throughout the year. These tables allowed priests to divide the night into repeating intervals. Observers recorded which deacon appeared on the horizon, giving them a precise sense of progress through the night during ceremonies, offerings, and security patrols. The star tables themselves reveal careful calculation, noting shifts in rising times as seasons changed. Deacons also contributed to seasonal calibration. Their positions across the night sky provided markers that helped determine the time of year when combined with solar observations and the heliacal rising of Sirius. Documents such as the Cairo calendar show references to deacons used for interpreting seasonal changes, and this text may even preserve the earliest known record of a variable star, likely Algol, demonstrating the sophistication of Egyptian sky-watching. Temples relied on precise timing for rituals, purification procedures, and offerings that had to occur at specific intervals. Deacons enabled priests to maintain consistent schedules even during long nighttime ceremonies. Agricultural planning likewise benefited, as nighttime markers reinforced expectations for seasonal activities and helped communities track the slow drift of the civil calendar over generations. This system was not ornamental. The precision embedded in decanal timing demonstrates that Egyptian astronomy operated as a practical science integrated into daily governance, religious authority, and agricultural management. It also shows how observational data guided decisions long before the development of instruments capable of mechanical measurement. And here's where things shift. By combining decans with lunar cycles and the fixed civil year, Egypt created a multi-layered timekeeping structure that allowed religious, administrative, and astronomical systems to operate in alignment, giving the civilization a level of temporal organization unmatched anywhere else in the ancient world. A three-calendar system. Egypt operated with 3 calendars simultaneously: the civil calendar, the lunar religious calendar, and the astronomical Sothic calendar. Evidence suggests that each filled a distinct role, and together they formed a coordinated system more intricate than that of any neighboring society. These calendars were not substitutes for one another, but specialized tools serving different layers of Egyptian life. The civil calendar governed administration. It structured tax cycles, labor rotations, construction planning, legal documentation, and resource distribution. Because its months and seasons never shifted, officials could plan projects years in advance. Papyrus records from temple estates and royal construction sites show how tasks were assigned to specific days and months, demonstrating how deeply the civil calendar shaped state operations. The lunar calendar governed religious life. Priests tracked the lunar month meticulously, marking festivals, purification rites, and major temple anniversaries. The cycle of new moon, waxing phases, full moon, and waning phases shaped ritual timing across the country. Because lunar months shifted against the civil calendar, major festivals often drifted across the administrative year. Temple inscriptions document how priests maintained records that aligned lunar observances with civil dates, ensuring rituals occurred at the correct phase regardless of their position in the civil year. The Sothic calendar formed Egypt's long-term astronomical backbone. By tracking the heliacal rising of Sirius, Egyptians maintained awareness of how far the civil year had drifted from the true solar cycle. The Sothic cycle, spanning roughly 1,460 years, allowed scholars and priests to calculate long-range drift patterns without altering the civil calendar itself. This cycle anchors some of Egypt's most securely dated historical events. Managing 3 calendars required constant cross-referencing. Administrative papyri showed dual and sometimes triple date notation. Temple archives preserved tables aligning lunar days with civil ones. Astronomical diaries record Sothic risings used to check long-term accuracy. The coordination involved reveals a sophisticated understanding of cyclical time and demonstrates how Egyptian scholars manage multiple temporal layers without collapsing them into a single system. Here's where things turn toward broader influence. This multi-layered approach to time became one of Egypt's most significant legacies, shaping how later civilizations conceptualized structured time and laying the foundation for calendar reforms that reached far beyond the Nile Valley. How Egypt's calendar shaped Greek and Roman timekeeping. When the Greeks took control of Egypt under the Ptolemies, they adopted the Egyptian civil calendar for administrative use. This wasn't a superficial borrowing. It altered how time was measured across the Eastern Mediterranean. Greek officials discovered that Egypt's fixed 365-day system was far easier to administer than the fragmented lunar calendars used in many Greek city-states. The civil calendar's stability made taxation, bureaucratic rotation, and temple scheduling far more predictable. In 238 BCE, the Canopus Decree documented an attempt to refine the calendar by adding a leap day every 4 years. This was the earliest known proposal for systematic leap year correction. Although Egyptian priests rejected the reform at the time, the decree preserved the concept in Greek scholarly circles. It became part of the intellectual toolkit of Hellenistic astronomy. Greek astronomers in Alexandria learned Egyptian methods, counting solar days, tracking the Sothic cycle, and treating the year as a fixed administrative structure rather than a shifting lunar sequence. This expertise became crucial when Rome needed reform. Julius Caesar's calendar was months out of alignment with the seasons, and his advisors turned to an Alexandrian astronomer, Sosigenes, for a solution. Sosigenes drew directly from the Egyptian civil year and incorporated the leap year idea first articulated in the Canopus Decree. The result was the Julian calendar, the immediate ancestor of the modern Gregorian version. Its architecture, 12 months, fixed lengths, and leap year adjustments, reflects the Egyptian model filtered through Greek science and Roman administration. The calendar used across much of the world today didn't originate independently in Europe. It rests on Egyptian foundations, carried forward through centuries of scholarship and reform. What comes next brings attention to a structural detail that made the Egyptian year work at all: the 5 additional days set apart from the rest of the calendar. The 5 extra days that stood outside the year. Egyptians added 5 epagomenal days at the end of the civil year, creating a stable 365-day cycle. These days served administrative, astronomical, and religious functions while remaining structurally separate from the rest of the calendar. Their uniqueness lay not in myth alone, but in how they allowed the year to close cleanly without altering the fixed 30-day months. Administrative papyri reveal that no new tax records, census actions, or labor rotations began during these days. Scribes treated them as a neutral zone between years, ensuring that financial accounts and agricultural tallies ended in an orderly way. This separation allowed officials to reset annual obligations without disrupting ongoing cycles in the regular months. Temple inscriptions from Dendera and Edfu document the religious dimension. These days marked the births of Osiris, Horus the Elder, Seth, Isis, and Nephthys. Ritual instructions recorded on walls and papyri describe offerings and restrictions specific to this period. The epagomenal days were considered liminal, neither part of the old year nor the new, and required careful ceremonial handling. Astronomically, their existence shows Egypt's preference for consistency over correction. Instead of modifying the calendar annually with leap adjustments, Egyptians kept the structure rigid and tracked long-term drift through the Sothic cycle. The epagomenal days reflect this commitment to a standardized system that privileged administrative clarity. Here's where things turn. These extra days highlight the Egyptian strategy of separating different layers of time, practical, religious, and astronomical, while keeping the overall calendar stable for millennia. This final step allows us to evaluate the larger legacy, how these structures shaped the calendars that followed, and why their influence persists into the present. The long shadow of the Egyptian calendar. Modern timekeeping carries direct traces of Egypt's calendar. The structure most of the world uses today, organized months, a 365-day framework, and periodic leap year corrections, derives from principles first established along the Nile. Egypt's innovations were never isolated. They evolved within a system that blended environmental observation with administrative needs in ways later civilizations found indispensable. The Egyptians were the first to formalize a fixed 365-day civil year. This allowed governments to schedule taxes, regulate agricultural labor, and plan state projects without the shifting uncertainty of lunar months. Sirius provided one of the earliest astronomical baselines for the length of the year, anchoring the calendar in a repeatable celestial cycle. The 3 seasons structure, flood, growth, and harvest, organized time around measurable environmental stages that shaped the economy. Greek scholars absorbed these methods, studying Egyptian solar calculations and the Sothic cycle. When Rome redesigned its broken calendar, the reformers adopted the Egyptian civil year as their template. The Julian calendar that emerged from this process carried Egyptian logic into Europe, and the later Gregorian reform merely fine-tuned the same framework. Archaeological evidence from inscriptions, papyri, and astronomical documents confirms this continuity. The idea that time should be divided into standardized units with consistent lengths, a foundation of modern life, originated in Egypt's efforts to manage a complex state with precision. The calendar used worldwide today is not a modern invention from scratch. It is the final form of a structure built thousands of years ago by a civilization aligning its time with a river, a star, and the administrative needs of an enduring state. Do you think we've underestimated how scientifically advanced ancient civilizations truly were? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.